and welcome today to Teacher's Table. We are talking about IEPs today from the point of view of a retired teacher, a recently graduated teacher who's been teaching for about 6 months now, and an instructional assistant who's going to become a teacher. So we have Miss Brand with us today. She's a retired teacher. Say hello, Miss Brand.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
And we have Marissa, Miss Lowell, and she is our recently graduated teacher. Say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And the cool thing is that we have all worked together in the same classroom in 1 year. So it's been a crazy year, and it's been, we've worked there with the same students, and it's been very educational. And so we're going to help you guys learn a little bit more about IEPs today. All right, so our first question is, what is the primary purpose of individualized education plans, which is what an IEP is?
Well, the primary purpose of an IEP is that we want to ensure students with disabilities receive the same kinds of educational experiences as their non-disabled or general education peers. So to achieve that, we would need to consider the components that make up the IEP.
Okay, and we have two different types of students who get IEPs, right? The ones who are still in the general educational classroom, and then we also have the ones that are in the self-contained classrooms with a ESC teacher.
Yes, and that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And we've worked with both, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
All right, and can you summarize briefly the core components that make up an IEP?
Yes, the core components are the student's present level of educational performance, the annual or long-term goals for students on the IEP. There's also short-term goals. There's a list of all services that students need. That can include speech and language pathology, OT, occupational therapy, or physical therapy. The frequency and duration of those services, so it tells you the minutes they get per week. The statement of how much time the students participate with non-disabled peers, so again the minutes that they do that throughout the week, the modifications needed to participate in standardized testing or whether the student needs alternative testing, and then how the progress will be monitored throughout the year. So that's everything that's covered on an IEP.
So in the classroom that we were in together, we worked with students that needed modified curriculum.
Mm-hmm. And modified testing.
Right, and then they had to take alternative testing because no matter what support we gave them, they would never be able to achieve the same standards as their general education peers.
Okay.
So we definitely had experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so we have we have our student that we discussed that has an IEP, and her name is
Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to discuss a little bit about what she needed and what her IEP includes and why she needs an IEP. So, Ms. Brand, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So Veronica, her disability keeps her from being able to focus and maintain appropriate behavior in the classroom. She's very easily distracted, and then because she's distracted, she thinks everyone else should be distracted.
Yeah, very disruptive.
So she's, a delightful girl, but just,
Yes.
Educationally speaking, she needed support to be able to meet her standards. So an IEP would help her because again, we would analyze those present levels for her, and they would show that her testing scores do not reflect her actual intellectual abilities. She's a bright girl, but because of all these distractions and not having any accommodations, her testing scores, showed that she didn't know what she was
Right.
doing.
But she is in the general education.
Right,
Primarily.
right.
She was not in our
No,
class with
yes,
us. So
but because she was interacted with our students, we got to know her.
yes.
But the IP would then provide the accommodations that she would need and the least restrictive environment that she also would need to help her be successful.
And so
And
that
that's
allowed
what-
her to be in the general education classroom, and then
Yes.
she got pulled out for some.
It was usually a life skills course with an
That's
ESE
it,
teacher
yes,
to
life
provide
skills.
behavioral support
Yeah,
Yes.
and regulation.
and that allowed them to do help them with their homework.
Exactly,
And,
help them with
and-
other
and give
aspects
them-
of their education.
Yeah, and that's different. We're not talking about the standard core courses. She
Mhm.
had to be with the general ed teacher for that, and
Right.
that's what she really needed those accommodations for.
Right. Alright, so if we break down the steps involved in the development of an IEP plan, what are some of the steps that we would first start with?
So we would first conduct a pre-referral sort of evaluation that includes a review of the anecdotal records, all the educational records of maybe the state standard testing, benchmark testing, attendance, and various other screenings, so maybe psychological evaluations, anything outside that may impact educational abilities.
I'm just going to stop you there. Again, we can't do this
Oh
psychological
yes, we can't do them ourselves.
without parental approval. So,
Oh, yeah.
so the screening up to that point.
Yes.
Correct. They have to
So-
approve the
The stakeholders do.
psychological.
That is very true.
And
Okay.
they immediately start getting services as soon as the pre-referral is put in.
Approved by
Yeah.
a parent. Exactly. So I was going to say next, after it's parent approved and the evaluations are parent approved, they would gather the results along with input from all the other stakeholders, so the general educators, the school psychologists, maybe another parent that wasn't there before or something like that. They would input all of that data and go from there.
And they have to have the
There would be the general education
where the
teacher
general
present.
education. Okay.
Well, that would, yes, you would just have to have a few people here just at the beginning.
This is the assessment
Mhm.
team,
Right,
not
not
the
the
IEP
IEP
team.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So,
So
yeah.
this is before all the people.
Before we
retire.
actually have an IEP
Okay.
team. So, yeah, on the parents, when she was mentioning the parent, a lot of times we can do that in the form of a survey.
Mhm.
The parents can fill out a survey and the results of that. And it's interesting because I've seen cases where a parent sees their child as one way, but the teacher that sees him every day sees him a little bit different. So
I've seen that survey on my own
Yes.
kid.
Okay.
And we had 2 different teachers
okay.
plus mom and dad. So that was 4 different views.
Wow.
The pediatrician just laughed because she's like, there were 4 different views of this child. So I know one teacher of mine matched a lot,
Okay.
and then James was like kind of, but then there was one teacher that was completely off.
So, yeah, maybe she didn't see him being his true self or something.
She saw him in the afternoon when he
Oh.
was his
Sleepy after lunch.
more active.
Oh, more active.
Yeah, he couldn't
Okay.
sit down because he was tired.
I
Because if he sat down, he would fall asleep.
Okay. All right.
All right, so we covered the breakdown and the steps of the IEP. So we went with the pre-referral. So now we have the 5 steps of the IEP. Okay, so we're going to cover the assess. Right, so we did the pre-referral, so now we're going to assess and discover what services the students need and put together the IEP plan.
Right. Well, and
we're
more
definitely
specifically,
Exactly. More specifically, we should compare and contrast the difference between the accommodations needed or the modifications needed, depending on what kind of disabilities these kinds of students
Yes.
have.
Okay.
because one mistake many and even experienced teachers make is that we think accommodations and modifications mean the same thing, and
Right.
so
Very different.
they are.
Yes.
So first of all, we always talk data. So the
Mhm.
data would show us if a student needed accommodations in how they access the standards,
Mhm.
okay? So do they need extra time? Do they need a separate group? That kind of thing. Uh, they need, so whatever it is to access that standard curriculum. Or would the data show that they needed an adjusted curriculum through modifications? So for example, when we were talking about Veronica earlier, she would benefit from accommodations such as smaller class size, having extended time, and preferential seating to kind of be away from her distractions.
Yeah.
And then I had a student in my self-contained classroom named Danny, and he had a profound intellectual disability. So we decided we needed to use the above accommodations, so the preferential seating, the small class size, the extended time, along with a modified curriculum providing simplified content, cutting down extra details that could confuse them, and making it much more streamlined.
And with Veronica, her modification would be that life
No.
skill class.
No, you're misusing
exactly.
it.
You just switched it.
I
Her
just-
accommodation.
Yes, her
Okay.
accommodation would be the life skill class because not all the students took that.
And the content in that class is not being simplified, not being changed, but the way it's taught is being changed, but
Okay.
not the content itself.
Yes.
However, students with more profound disabilities, or even gifted students who need modified curriculum, it would either be more advanced or more simplified.
Okay. All right, and so now we have the design, the image that your task is to create the IEP. So what does an IEP look like? How do you create one of those?
Okay, and I believe you specifically want an IEP for a student with a learning disability.
Yes.
And one of the most common learning disabilities is dyslexia. And so Marissa's much more, Miss Lowell is much more experienced. She had a student like this.
So I had a student with dyslexia, and this was her kindergarten year, her second kindergarten year, that they were reviewing her progress and creating an IEP for her. So specifically, she struggled with decoding, and we created an IEP where her goals would make sure she would work on digraphs, letter sounds, and pattern recognitions in words and within the alphabet. And then these strategies would be within a small group setting, and they would be with a preferred instructor. So it would be myself or one other instructor, because the IA in that particular classroom was not well versed. She was an English language learner herself, so I feel like the letter sounds were a little bit more confusing for Molly to learn from her. So then, additionally, we would cover those topics in my classroom, and then she would get support services from a speech and language pathologist. And that's how we ensured that her IEP goals were getting met, because we took so many different approaches with so many different people to ensure that there was growth. And that's really how we stuck to the plan. It was a team effort. We stuck to the very specific things.
Okay. All right, well, that was great. I also wanted to ask you, how has the IEP process changed since when you first started teaching, Miss Byrne, to Miss Lowell's teaching now?
Well, honestly, I know how it's changed in the past year, literally just the past year. From my internship until my actual first year teaching, not only was it elementary school to middle school, and we covered how transition services were needed for students above the age of 12 and how that's going to impact their adulthood. And then in elementary school, we didn't cover that at all. There are new requirements that are in Peer, which is the particular software we use to create the IEPs. There are new accommodation tabs that you have to fill in, and you have to ensure that the accommodations are the exact same as the previous year unless otherwise deemed needed to change. And that only happened a year ago, because before, essentially, it was, as long as it was listed before, you didn't have to list it again in the same way. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. But that's changed.
As long
That's
as
a
it was in the
new,
file.
pretty much, exactly. As long as it was documented before, but now it needs to be documented new every single time.
Okay.
Which I didn't even know changed, but my supervising teacher in my internship specifically said that these are new, not accommodations, these are new additions that you
I
need
can
to
see
stay.
that.
Requirements.
Because if you don't read far back enough,
Exactly.
then you can miss something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, I mean, it is helpful when we are developing the IEP to look at prior IEPs and to look at prior data, not just the data you've recently acquired, and so that is definitely beneficial. I would say how it has changed for me is it's definitely much more a team approach. It's always supposed to be a team.
Yes.
But in the past, I just felt like I did a lot of it on my own. I really would have to beg for data from people. Maybe not the parents, but, fellow teachers and that kind of thing. Not realizing the importance of the IEP. I mean, it is individualized. You want to be, you want the student to be able to access the curriculum they need to access. And whereas now I felt like, wow, there's so many people that I can go to, and even if they're not on my IEP team, they might have experience with.
So there's a lot more support for
yes,
each
definitely.
person who's writing the IEP.
Yes, and then you, as my instructional assistant, gave me a valuable input, and sometimes we overlook the people that spend day to day with our, hour minute to minute with our students.
Yes, we did.
You definitely.
No play period for the IAs.
Yes, so that is while not required to be on the IEP team, the input is very valuable.
Well, thank you very much. All right, well, ladies, I just wanted to thank you so much for helping me with this assignment and coming in and producing this, and I think I will keep this forever. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.